Hello and welcome to the Rat Nest Podcast, episode number 15 with Eddie from Strangers.
Woo!
Hey man, thank you so much for being here and making the time. As you were just saying, I know you've got a bunch of stuff going on, moving and flying and being an all-around jet setter. Thanks for sitting down and letting us bullshit with you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being here, man.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be on.
So a little background for anyone that doesn't know what Strangers Fanzine is. I think it gets mentioned every episode of the podcast we do. I don't know if you've listened to any, dude, but everyone obviously is a fan. You've worked with a lot of people that we were working with, and you've given them a platform to kind of do their thing and kind of push artists who are working for themselves. So thank you from all of us for that. Shit is tight. So just real quick background. How did it get started? You're about a year and a half into it. You've been doing this?
Yeah, it was, I dropped the first issue on Valentine's Day, and that was Valentine's Day 2020. And, you know, it started, I always wanted to do a fanzine. Like, I came from kind of like punk and hardcore where it was really prevalent. And, you know, my friend Kyle from Dead at Birth, he like does a fanzine called Dead at Birth, and like, he had been doing it for a little bit, and I was always felt really inspired by him. And I just like didn't have any like graphic design skills or like any art. So I was like always intimidated by the process. Then I got a job after college in marketing and like was taught like all the Adobe programs. And then, you know, fast forward a while later, I didn't really have a creative outlet, and I was down at Cab in Brooklyn, and I had seen Bubbles online, but it was like the first time I was able to like pick up a copy, and I was like, oh, like, you know, fanzines are in comics too. And, you know, this isn't just something for hardcore. And, you know, I pretty much like left Cab, and I had picked up a Paul Kirchner book there. And his email was in the back of it. And I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm going to email this dude. And like, you know, I want to interview him. I want to focus on some of these weirder guys that I've been really into. And I think like that night he had gotten back to me. I was like, all right, like, you know, we're doing it.
Yeah, it's like, it's on. Was Kirchner was the first person you reached out to as far as to do an interview with?
Yeah, I was like sitting in my office, like kind of just like looking at Kirchner and then like going and trying to figure out who else I wanted to interview. And I had grabbed like somewhere in this rack behind me is like a bunch of old like biker magazines, and like I was like flipping through, like I was just flipping through them, and there was like a bunch of artwork in there, and I was like, man, this art's so cool. Like, I'd be cool to interview that guy. Like, I wonder what he's doing. And I already had Kirchner down, so then I discovered like it was this guy Don Lomax, and I had no idea he had done like Vietnam comics and stuff like that. So I just emailed him. I was like, hey, you know, I had your Outlaw Biker magazines. Like, would love to interview. And he, you know, I think a day or two later, he got back to me, and that was kind of the two of them.
That's crazy, because that first episode or the first issue is the one, you know, I picked up, and I hadn't heard of or Don Lomax, but I'd heard of Kirchner, and just their style of art. I remember seeing it like as a kid, not knowing, maybe it wasn't them directly, but just like kind of in that vein of what they do. And it really like kind of speaking, because it was a little bit more a mature animation, a little bit more of like finished and not as cartoony as some of the other stuff as you know, you're reading Garfield comics or whatever as a kid. So it was like mature, but like it was still like humor, and then it was like gory. It was like, this is rad, you know. But it was really interesting just to see the first issue where you talk to these guys who were, you know, they're born in the 40s and 50s. They're our seniors by far, and then just talking about I don't know, working in an agency surrounded by all this other talent, and that's kind of how they got a go, or, you know, they got their first shot because this amazing illustrator brought them into the writing room or whatever it was. Super fucking crazy, dude. Like, it's crazy that you were just like, oh, I'm going to email these guys, and they got right back.
Yeah. Kudos to you for just doing that and having the balls just to like, hey, I'm just going to reach out. Why not? I
figured like, you know, they're either going to not email me back or they're going to say no. And like, you know, if they say no, like, you know, comics has been around for a long time. There's plenty of people I'd like to interview. And like, I find those, like the two of them were interviewing them kind of side by side was really interesting, because there were so many parallels, and like they're, you know, I don't know if they ever met. I never got that far, but they worked so kind of in tandem, and like that copper age of cartooning was so, and like of comics was so interesting. And it was, like you said, like people was kind of coming in out of agencies and working kind of, you know, a lot of them were working under Neil Adams or working under, you know, Gil Kane, and just training these guys that were, you know, their predecessors. And, you know, the Silver Age cartoonists were bringing in all these Copper Age guys and kind of giving them their first shot. But like, I feel like with the Silver Age guys, it seemed like there was more of a guarantee of work, where with these Copper Age guys, like they're fucking hustling for this work. Like that's why their resumes, like I have Don Lomax's resume, and it's literally like 6 pages long of everything you could think of. And same with Kushner, and like even going on to like to Ken Landgraf, like that dude, like he did art for like restaurants, like anything he do, like he did it. And that was like, I don't know, that Copper Age stuff is that's my favorite type, like era to interview.
Hell yeah.
No matter what it's really titled as, that's kind of the underground scene. When you have to hustle and you have to push and you have to just be at every show, repping yourself, you know, marketing yourself, wearing every hat that it takes to run the business of being an artist. That's really a true underground. So that Copper Age that you're talking about, I hear like underground hip hop or underground music when we used to play punk rock shows and stuff, where you're making the flyers, you're getting the show people there. It's very like an obvious comparison there.
Yeah, and you're not turning down work. It's like, I don't care if it's for Penthouse or for High Times or for Easy Rider or for heavy metal or
for
like
Airplane magazines,
corporate
like
gig, or you know, you just any job that comes your way, you got to take it. And you know, the comparison to punk is pretty accurate, because it's like you're banging your own drum. And a lot of the time, like with those dudes, like they were based out of New York, because that's where a lot of that scene was, because Marvel and DC were there. And like, you know, hearing Landgraf talk about like, yeah, like I was going to CBGBs in the 70s. Like it's punk, is like punk ethos. And also like sometimes like straight up, like those dudes are into punk or like doing that kind of stuff very early on. It's just, I love talking like that age of cartooning. I feel like it's been a little bit underrepresented.
Now, do you think that Copper Age, the transition from this Copper Age into the Silver Age, or like what happened there, was catalyst because of what they were doing in that DIY, that total push, and it couldn't help but get exposure? Or do you think it was like because all of a sudden there's this new generation of artists that come out with something new and these guys are kind of left behind? Like, I'm unfamiliar with this age, I guess is what I'm saying. And so what would you, in your opinion, what's
the shift? What
would have catalyst that shift into this kind of new age or different style or whatever?
I don't know a lot of the history of it. I believe, like, you know, so it went gold, silver, copper, modern, I think was how it more or less handled. Someone's going to correct me and tell me I'm wrong, but that's okay. But I know with like the Silver Age guys, like, you know, that stuff was obviously selling less than the gold, because they were not, like, comics just started dying after World War II. And then like the Silver Age, like that stuff was, but like not to the same degree. And then with the Copper Age, like it was a lot of people coming back from Vietnam, and like they just kind of were aimless, and a lot of them were like creating in Vietnam. Like both Landgraf and Don Lomax were in Nam and came back from Nam and started pursuing, you know, cartooning full time. And I think everything just felt less guaranteed after that era.
Sure.
Or like, you know, culturally, it just felt less, you know.
Well, and just hearing, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just hearing what you're saying, like these guys had this era of comics, went away to war and came back. They kind of wanted to have that same nostalgia or that same comic book feel, but wanted it to represent what they're feeling now and how they're thinking now, I'm sure. And so there's the shift, in my opinion. That makes perfect sense why there would be a transition, especially not only in style, but in content, in kind of the different superheroes or the different reasoning behind the conflict in each comic book or in the story, you know? That makes perfect sense.
It's everything definitely did feel darker. Like even this time before like Watchmen, like things were still getting to a point like where they were feeling darker and weirder. And I think a lot of it's that post-Vietnam feel.
And you do a good job about curating Strangers that has like lighthearted stuff in it, like a lighthearted strip. Say, I think it's issue 2, maybe, that has Alex Delaney,
Yep.
which is like a super dark, gritty kind of illustrator, comic book maker. And then you have like the who's it? Yeater, Adam Yeater, and
yeah.
it's like just kind of like a fun comic strip, and they're just back to back, and it doesn't feel out of place. You can like flow in between. You have a good eye for kind of like layout and curating what you do with Strangers, which is admirable and awesome, dude, because we try to walk a line with who we have in Rat Nest as far as the web store and who we're promoting. And it's hard sometimes because you can respect the art, but maybe it doesn't fit. And like, how do you make that fit? And you know, how's it all come together?
You do a really good job of collaborating the right artists at the right time, I guess.
Do you ever have issues with that? Like, do you ever find yourself like, this doesn't really go together? Like, do you get so many submissions that you get to pick and choose what you think works, or how's that go?
I think with Strangers, I'm a little more hands-on with it. Like, you know, the first couple issues, it was like, especially the first issue where I was getting original work, it was like the first, like, you know, people came to me and they're like, hey, like, you know, I'd love to do a strip in this. And I didn't have many contacts within small press to begin with. So I was pretty open to like taking whoever I was interested in. I think really the only person I worked really closely with on like a piece was like Jasper's Daredevil strip. Cause like I'd been wanting to do bootlegs. And then been wanting to work with Jasper, and he kind of pitched me on like, hey, like, what if I did a bootleg? And like, I feel like I pitched him on a different superhero, and he's like, actually, I feel like I want to do Daredevil. And I was like, that's a great idea. Like, sure.
I love his strip, dude, and it's so
amazing.
You know, uniquely like his style with the small blocks, and you kind of can just see it right away when you're flipping through if you're familiar. I think I got Dynamite Diva before I even realized that Daredevil strip was him, and then put it back together, like going through it later. But for anyone that doesn't know who we're talking about, it's Jasper Jubinville. He's part of your distro line, right? You distribute and have published a couple works that are collabs between you and him. Can you tell us a little bit about how you formed the connections to start picking people for the distribution?
Yeah. So there's kind of two sides to it, which in my head, I thought was a lot clearer. And I've started to find when I'm like pitching to retailers that it's not as clear as it seems. So it's kind of, you know, I have the publishing line, which is things that like the name, you know, it's right there. It's Strangers Fanzine Presents, and it's titles that I'm handpicking and, you know, paying the money for and printing, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's just titles that like, they might not necessarily be things that I'm going to publish, but like, I'll pitch them to stores, or I'll do reprints, or I just carry in my own store. You know, I'm staring at boxes of books that I have for a release tomorrow, and it's, you know, it's either stuff that I really like, or I think people that are my readers would really like. And that's, you know, going back to what you said about like kind of handpicking and making things flow together. There's this weird line that like I've started to kind of bring closer together, but like, some of the stuff I like might not necessarily be the best fit for like what I know the Strangers audience likes, but I'm trying to kind of push the two together. Like, I didn't think Goiter or Rodeo would be something that my audience would necessarily have been into right off the bat. You know, I had been pushing a lot of this like, you know, hyper genre, like real violent stuff. And, you know, Goiter and Rodeo are not that. They're rather kind of, you know, they're very narrative storytelling, and they're, you know, Josh's stuff's a little sad, and Rodeo's kind of, you know, just kind of quiet cartooning, as I would use the word. And then like, you know, put that next to something like a Richard Corbin comic or Warlock 5, like they're very different. And I didn't know how people would react, but like, you know, they're sold really well for me. At this point, like we've reprinted every issue besides 5, like number 5.
Awesome.
And like I even put out like Goiter number 1 as like a first issue. And that was like under the Strangers Fanzine. So I've been happy with how much I've been able to blur that line together. I went off on a little bit of a tangent. I apologize.
No, you're good. It brings up a point I'm interested in, just because I've actually messaged you a couple times, just kind of shooting the shit, but also asking questions of how you're doing what you're doing, because there are a lot of parallels in the project that I'm doing here with Rat Nest and stuff. And I asked you kind of how you were going about your distribution and how you were getting copies out, and you were just, you know, have PDFs, have it available to the person who's going to be the buyer at the shop. Makes it easy for them. They have more inclination to say yes. But how many at a time copies are you producing for each launch or each drop?
It ranges. With some of the stuff, I'm usually with the publishing stuff, it's between like 100 and 300 copies to start. And then like I'll roll out second printings kind of on a need basis. Mm-hmm. But then stuff I'm carrying, you know, if I'm testing something, I'll pick up like 5. And then if it's something I kind of like, all right, these, like, you know, people are really going to like this, like it'll be 20 plus. Like I have something I have 75 copies of. So it really ranges.
Right.
It's kind of everything in between. For the most part, like 20 feels comfortable for me. And then if I need to order more, I will. I try not to keep things in like drops more than twice now, just so I can kind of give some time between them. Like I have that Hell Is in Your Heart book, and like it'll be in the second drop, and it was in last month's drop, and then I'll rotate it out for something else for a while.
All right. I like to talk about like creative process and like what gets you to where you've been or whatever. And you just mentioned, if you see something and you know people are going to like it, you're going to grab 75 copies of it or whatever to distribute. Walk me through that mind process of what is it? What makes something pop to you? What desires or what piques your desire? Like, what is it that stands out to something or makes you stray away from something else?
For me, it's, I tend to kind of go towards things with like, you know, a singular vision, like just one cartoonist on the whole thing. And I really like something that's got a unique eye that like you can pick up this book and it's, you know, you're not questioning if it's somebody else. Like, you know, if you open half the books on the shelf every month, like you're like, oh, I don't know if this is Jim Lee or his 800 other clones, but like, you know, you pick up a book by Jasper, like, you know, it's Jasper. Like, you know a Richard Corbin book when you see it, you know, like a Ben Marcus book when you see it. So that's kind of the one thing that I really like is like, it is undoubtedly the cartoonist's vision. And I really like genre comics. I think, you know, as cliche as they can be and, you know, as saturated as the market is, like there's still a need for them and there's still interesting things coming out. Like, you know, look at, I'm going to probably say the name wrong, P-E-O-W, like everything they do looks amazing. And like Al Gofa and Connor Williamson, like that stuff looks so good. And like, that's a big inspiration for me. It's just like, you know,
identity in the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the fact they're putting out these really cool genre comics and like people are biting onto it and not just like, you know, mass consumers, like they're getting, you know, critical review as you would call it. It really comes down to like a lot of it's like I pick stuff that I like most of the time. And, you know, I said before, like there's a little bit of a line that like separates what I think I would like versus what other people would like. But like for the most part, those lines have gotten those two, you know, that Venn diagram has gotten very close together where like I can almost say like 9 times out of 10, I can probably push a book that I would like to my fans. The only thing I probably think right now that I wouldn't is like some of the manga that I read. But even then, like I put something out the other day, I was like, hey, like, do you guys want this? Like I'll handpick some titles I like.
Yo, so I have a question. So when you're working on a presentation, a publishing project, so say Dynamite Diva with Jasper, do you let the artist do their thing? Do you trust in them to like, do they have it and they come to you like, I got this book, just publish it for me? Or is it a joint effort in the creation of the book?
I'm almost totally hands off. Like outside of a pitch, like I'll be like, all right, like, you know, what's the title? What's the pitch? And then if I like it, I'll be like, how many pages do you think you can get it done in? And they'll tell me and I'll say like, all right, like that. It's really that easy. Like I've only ever had to edit one thing, and it was just because like the subject matter was a little bit like ooh, this might, it wasn't bad. It was just something that I was like, I don't know if this is like the right way to go about it. And that was the only thing I've ever had to edit. For the most part, like I give full creative control. Like I'm not working with artists that I don't trust, which is kind of a big thing. Like,
or that you're not familiar with. Yeah,
exactly. Like lately I've been taking a little bit more risk on like some artists that like I've seen coming out and like they've sent me a few samples. If that's such a thing, if I've not seen a book from them, I'll have them send me a few sample pages, or I'll have them do something in Strangers, and I'll be like, hey, like, why don't you do a few pages in Strangers, like almost as a tryout?
Mm-hmm.
And if it works out, I'll be like, great, like, let's go for it. Like that trench coat book, like Jake had only done like a mini comic before, and I loved his work, but a lot of it at the time, there was like a couple different styles he was going for, and like, I just wanted to make sure that like I would be getting the style I was interested in. So I told him, like, hey man, like do a few pages. And he gave me a pitch and I was like, these are amazing. Like, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Hell yeah. Is that how you go about with like the full production now? Because the first issue was basically just you on your own, right? You did everything like the first issue. And then by like issue 2, I know like David Moses has like an interview in there, and you have maybe a couple other contributors, and then they kind of grow as the issues go along. A lot of the same guys, but you're kind of like building a team. So now is it just kind of like submit your work, or do you give assignments to people?
I still do submit your work. Me and David are kind of collaborative at this point. He'll usually pitch me, and I'm happy to do whatever he'd like. I think the only time I'll tell him like no is if I just don't have the room. Like he pitched me on a second interview for issue 6. Now I had to say no because it just didn't have the room for it. But we reworked it into something that made a little more sense. And then with Ian Thomas too, he writes that like, but wait, don't forget about series. Mm-hmm. He'll give me a few titles. He'll be like, I'm thinking of either doing this, or this, and then I'll just kind of pick one. And he kind of rolls with it. But for the most part, like I let people sort of do their thing there.
That's awesome. That's cool that you have a good enough relationship and trust these guys to do the work, and you're behind it.
Well, everyone you mentioned though, they got their work shows their work ethic. You can see it in the work. Yeah. You know what I mean? When you look at certain work, you just know, these guys are trying. They are doing it. They are putting the time in. They are editing, re-editing, rough drafting, final drafting, Yeah. I mean, Ian writes for TCJ. He's a way better writer than I'll ever be. I'm like, hey man, like you do your thing, and I'll send him back like a PDF of like when I format it. He'll be like, oh, like he'll edit my work half the time.
Yeah. That's good though,
dude. When you can work with people that you can benefit and promote each other like that, man, that's always better.
Totally.
That's awesome.
So also in the progression of Strangers, you've started this publishing distro line, but then also each issue of Strangers, I feel, gets gradually bigger. And then issue 5 was a fatty 90-page monster.
Well done, sir.
Dude, what was the thought behind that? What, just go big or go home?
That's why it's so big.
What's that?
There was no thought. That's why it's so big. I really just kind of let it get away from me, and I was like, there's just way too many like things going on. Because like David was like, oh, I want to do these 2 interviews, and then there was actually like that issue was supposed to have 2 more interviews in it, and I had to like push them. And it just kind of like I got overzealous and was like, yeah, like this is cool, and it was my first time where I was like, all right, you need to pump the brakes, because like this is why like I'm really burnt out from that issue. I haven't even started issue 6. I wanted it out in June. Like it's not happening. Actually, that's not true. I've done a couple interviews for issue 6, but and people just kept pitching me stuff, and then like some things got out of hand. Like there's an 8-page comic in there, and like it's really cool. And I remember I had told him like, oh yeah, like do between like 3 and 5 pages. He goes like, oh, it's probably gonna be 8, and I was like, well, whatever. Like. Make it work.
That hands-off method, bro. It works.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's mad about it, man. It's a hell of an issue. It's awesome.
For $7, 90 pages, I think. You're getting value.
Get out of here, dude.
We were flipping through. He brought all 5 issues when he came through today, and we were just flipping through beforehand, just kind of getting acquainted. That's when I personally realized the cohesion and everything. And then also what he said, it just gets fatter and fatter and fatter to where the fifth issue, it's like you could take days if you really wanted to absorb it all. And in the day and age that we live in, with where like content rules, like that was great. It felt like you were kind of adapting or almost forcing an adaptation to comics to social media. You know what I mean? Where people want content. They want to be able to binge. They want to put this thing next to their bed or next to the toilet and read it every single time they sit down and have one issue for the entire time. Just like scrolling, just get some constant reaffirmation. I feel like you're tapping into that same part of the brain when you just allowed this 90-page comic to come out and just like, you know what? F it. We're just doing the damn thing.
I appreciate, thank you. Because I definitely, I hadn't had that in mind. I just kind of, like I said, it was very absent-minded and let it get away from me. But, you know, you mentioned kind of adapting and getting a little more current. And one of the things I've heard, and this is not just about Strangers, like this is about, you know, Austin English's zine, it's about Bubbles, it's about, you know, any of them. It's funny how like far the pendulum has now swung back. Like there became like, you know, for a while there was a ton of fanzines and there was no internet like blogs or anything like that. And now there's only internet blogs and only websites, and like it's very difficult to sift through the noise. So there's something like, and it's very like, you know, it's very unpersonal. Like you're just kind of flipping on your phone and reading, and people like having that isolated experience of like holding something physical in their hands and engaging with, you know, a medium they love. And, you know, one of the things I really like to do, and I think is really important with Strangers, is that like, I like to have kind of this old and new, like, you know, I'm touching upon books that just came out or books that will just be coming out. Like, you know, I did that interview with Matt Lesniewski for Static. I did, you know, Alexis and Dave for Night Hunters. But on the flip side, like, I also want to talk with older creators and kind of have that balance. And I think the logic I had there was like, you know, the older creators can be an anchor to promote newer people. And that's sort of where I started with, that actually came from issue 2 when like David pitched me on Patrick. I was like, yeah, like I'd love to do Patrick, but then like, you know, no disrespect to him because I love him. Like I said, I have 75 copies of his book right in front of me, but like, you know, Jeff Darrow is what's selling that issue. But also, you know, people are going to come for Jeff Darrow and be like, well, I'm already reading this thing. I might as well read the whole thing. And then like, hopefully, you know, he got more fans out of that. And then same with Alex, and then same with anybody. So that for me is like the most important part of doing the magazine, is like anchoring these, you know, notorious acts or notorious creators, and then getting, you know, new exposure for young folks, young creators.
I think you've done a great job of that. I was going to bring that up with the from the first issue on, you have these, you know, Silver Age comic artists, and then also you got kids like, or young men, young women, who are up and coming, all self-published. All the reviews, almost every review you do is a self-published comic that I'm sure someone just sends you, and you put it in there. The reviews section grows in each episode, or in each issue. I keep saying episode, sorry, dude. But in each issue, there's more and more reviews where I'm sure just people are flooding you with mail, and you put it in and like respect, because they did the work to put it out and make it themselves. And like, you're always a good, I don't know, even keel. Like, you're not dogging on people. You're giving them a platform. You're letting them cross promote on this magazine with these guys that are legends. And then, you know, you got the up and comers, you got Nate Garcia, you got Josh Baer, you got, you know, David writing these amazing interviews with Hyena Hell and fucking Tom Neely and all these people. It's all over the board, but it all makes sense. It's awesome, dude. I
appreciate the note on, or just jumping on like what you said about the review section and not dogging on people. You know, in terms of like making sure I'm getting exposure for like newer cartoonists, like that's the one thing I never want to do. Like my old thing with the review section is like, you know, much to maybe like my to my fault, like I'm gonna review whatever is sent to me. It doesn't matter what it is. Like all this behind me is like all just books I have to review. And, you know, a lot of the time, like this is people's first interviews, and like, I'm not going to dunk on them. Like, they put so much hard effort into this. Like, what's the point? Like, it's to give someone like kind of a hand up and like not shred them. Like they, if you had the confidence to like send me this piece of work that you worked really hard on, like I would be an asshole to even give some sort of negative review to it. I've gotten things I didn't like, of course I did, but like there's always something positive to find with these pieces. And like, even if they get like one person that's interested, that's perfect. That's what I wanted. And I've had people reach out to me and they're like, I love the review section. I sit with a pen and paper and like, I'll write down all the titles I'm into and go, wow. Like, that's awesome. And like, I learned from that and I started caring. Like I started picking up stuff. I was like, if people are already going to like this book and I'm already, I'm praising this book and people are interested in buying this book. Like, why don't I sell it? Why don't I like give it right to them? And that's also kind of another thing. Like, it's a cosign for me. Like if it's in my shop, that means it's something I really, really love. And I think that's why people are like trust in the books I sell and they're like more willing to buy them. I don't know if everyone knows all the books they're buying, but like, I think they at least know, like if it's in my shop, that means it's something I personally like. And that's something like, I'll always say.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. It's like curation is
Exactly.
key, man. Especially for artists that, they're in their lane, they're creative, they're making their thing. But to pitch yourself to every single person is hard. To make those cold calls and try to sell your book, it sucks. And to have somewhere where you can cross promote and, be on the same level as like all these other guys and kind of get a chance, like you said, a hand up. That's awesome, dude. I dig what you're doing with Strangers, and I'm just so stoked to, see the progression and like all the response you've been getting. Like I said, every person we talk to name drops you or Strangers. So it's like, you obviously have a big impact on this kind of indie comic movement right now. What's the plan? Like, what did you see yourself here a year and a half ago? Like, did you see yourself like doing something different? Has it pivoted or shifted? Where do you want to go with this all?
A year and a half ago, I did not think I'd be doing any of this. Publishing stuff didn't come into mind until like maybe like August or July of last year. And where that was like, it really came like Jared Wolf hit me up and he was like, he even came out like this, like Jared and Jasper both hit me up and they're like, hey, like, we're not really interested in like doing this ourselves anymore. Like, we just want to draw. And like, I wrote on a photo of Jared's. I was like, you should let me publish this, just kind of joking around and like kind of, because just gassing him up. And he followed up with me. And he was like,
nice.
Do it. And I was like, all right. And then same thing happened with Jasper. Jasper was like, hey, like, like I've been wanting to print on like magazine size. Like, do you want to print for me? And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I love your work. Like, absolutely. I don't remember where the distro came from. Oh, the distro came from like, I just kept seeing like some of my friends' books, like, Atomic Hercules and Cosmic Slop. And like, I picked them up, but at like, the idea that there was a $7 shipping charge. And I was like, in my head, I was like, how many people aren't buying this book because of that reason? Like, you're paying the same amount to ship it as you are to buy the book. And I kind of just reached out to Adam and Jordan. And I was like, why don't you just send me a bunch of copies of your book and I'll sell it for you? And then eventually just grew from there. I kind of was like, you get in some more hands. Like at that time I had a decent network of shops. And I was like, I can try to promote it into some shops and just kind of help you out. And I was just doing it out of kind of, friendship and wanting to see their books get further out there. And then after that, it just kind of kept growing. And then some people hit me up. They're like, oh, do you want to carry my book? And I was like, yeah, like I like your book. Sure. And then just
awesome.
If you look at like the drops, like they'll see like, there was 3 titles and then there was 10 titles. And now I'm looking at 40 books in front of like 40.
Damn. That's awesome, dude. That's quick. A year and a half to have that, exponential growth is insane.
Well, and it speaks to the belief people have in your eye. If like you're saying, if it's on your site, you vouch for it and they know if he vouches for it, boom, I'm going to like
probably,
it.
It's quality at least.
And so that exponential growth that you're experiencing, it makes sense at that point. It just makes sense. You've got the eye, you've got enough people listening to you, and now you're creating a gravity towards it, man. Like we've said a few times, we cannot get through a damn episode with a comic without them mentioning Strangers. And so we're really stoked to finally have you on and be able to pick your brain and kind of like figure out, who is this Strangers guy? I've never met him. I never heard of him until we started this podcast. And then all of a sudden I can't help but go on and look at everything. And you know, you've got a really good selection. And coming from the Rat Nest side, the curator side, I respect that eye, that style, or that you see something. And I know I asked this question already, so I'm not going to go back into it, but you see something, and that something that you see is what people want. And so they're willing to just trust and believe and pull towards, and it really speaks a lot to you, man. So kudos.
Yeah. So here's the question though. What's the move? You said you're just working on issue 6. You're just kind of starting it.
No, he said he's procrastinating on issue 6.
He's not working on issue 6 at all. No, but you're going to pull it back from 90 pages, get it a little bit more dialed back. Are you going to keep like the ads? Were the ads like something that came after the fact because you were doing such a big issue?
I wanted to do ads. Like I did a few in issue 4 just to kind of test it out. I felt really weird about them for a while. And like, I just didn't know like what the value was. Like, or if there was value, like, you know, you can look up and figure out how many copies I've sold of each issue. Like, you know, you can tell by how many printings have sold out. So that's not hidden information. And I kind of figured, I was like, if people know that and they still want to buy ads, like, sure. Like, you know, I'm not an internet, like I'm not an internet page. I'm not getting, you know, fucking 10,000 clicks on a website, but like right. I sell 400 or 500 copies of an issue. Like, and people find value in that. And I was like, you know, who am I to say no? So I started really slow. I gave like a few people out, and then I started comping some ads. Like I gave David a piece, like, you know, I paid David as well, but then I was like, you know, have a half paid ad and then page ad, and then kind of rolled from there. And I opened up submissions for ads. And again, some were comped. Like if, you know, someone did a piece for me, like I'd give them an ad in there. Like I gave Nate did some, like font work for me in issue 5. And I was like, all right, like, you know, then throw me, like, you know, give me an ad as well. I'll run it for you.
Love Nate's work. Excuse me.
He's amazing. So future, because I avoided that twice. I have a lot of books I'm going to be publishing in the next like year or so. Again, in terms of being overzealous, I just kind of kept getting excited by projects and saying yes to them. So I think there's like 10 more books coming out that I have like planned so far. The next 2 are going to be in June sometime. And that's Nate's book, you know, Nate Garcia's Alonzo Sneak #1, mm-hmm. and Connor McCann's God Bless the Machine, which I haven't, I'm going to be dropping those covers soon to kind of promote like a release date on them. But like, you know, Nate's doing this really cool Western that that was one of the first times I was like, hey, like you should do this for me. Cause I really like the Alonzo piece. And I told Nate, I was like, you know, why don't you do a Western for me? And I was like, the only thing I have to say is like, you need to give me a shootout and you need to give me a horseback. Like, and he was like, yeah, I can do that. And then, so that's how that kind of came along. And then Connor, he just pitched, I think I messaged him, I was like, if you ever want to do a book together, like I'd love to. And he pitched me on this, like, I can't even explain the pitch. I had to have him actually like, give me a better description that I could give like thing. Cause it's just like the most insane, like a captured boy band in space gets freed by like some radical, like, you know, anarchist group. It's like the most insane shit, but like his style is so bizarre that it works perfectly. So those are the next 2 books for June. I still want to get 3 more issues of Strangers out by the end of the year. And then I'm planning on having a drop every month. You know, even despite moving, like I still am getting books in for the June drop, and I have everything that I want for June out. And, you know, I have a feeling once I settle in from the move, I'll finally get into working on Strangers 6.
Did you just move, or are you moving?
I am moving. I'm moving at the end of the month.
Oh, you're fucked, dude.
Yeah, bro, you better get with it. I see a lot of stuff on the wall there still. I appreciate you leaving it up. It's a great backdrop.
Yeah, dude.
It is. I started to like almost take it down today. I was like, no, it's gonna look really good. Like I shouldn't.
Thanks. We appreciate that. It's all about set design here at the Rat Nest podcast.
Since you're doing so much like curating and working with all the artists, do you want to take a minute and just kind of throw out or name drop the guys you're working with and the books that you've got coming out?
Anyone we haven't mentioned or anything we didn't just mention?
Yeah, I'm gonna probably rattle off names, and I'm gonna start with the ones I think I had. Worked with Jared Wolf on Sober #1. Jasper Jubenville did Dynamite Diva. Nate Garcia's doing Alonzo Sneak. Connor McCann did God Bless the Machine. I mentioned Adam Falf and Tony Esmond. They do a book called Atomic Hercules. I just distribute that book, but I've been a huge advocate from the beginning, and I will continuously be. They were the first book I started really distributing, and then it's been great for me, and I love working with them. Also, Adam has a strip that's been going in Strangers called Jungle Land, which that'll be out as a full-length issue after it wraps up in Strangers 6, and he's going to have like 10 or 15 pages of new material as well. Jordan Barry Brown does a book called Cosmic Slop that I really love, and that's the other book that I've really been pushing hard and distributing. Other books I have coming out, I'm working on something with Brian McRae.
Nice.
Who did that, he did that Mr. Miracle bootleg in #6 as well, or number 4 or 3, number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4.
believe.
Yeah.
They all kind of blend together, huh?
Yeah. Brian, I reached out to Brian. I was like, I think this would be kind of 2 ideas I think would be really cool if you wanted to do. And I pitched him on, I don't remember what the first pitch was, but the other one was like a sword and sorcery kind of book, because I just really like the way he does fantasy. And he was like, yeah, like what if I did it in like the old like Marvel magazine style, and like did like a few short stories and like, in the Conan or the Cole size books. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing a cool like kind of collection of short stories that are sword and stone fantasy.
Rad.
Bryce Martin's working on a book called The Onat. He had been pitching. He did a couple strips for me, and then we had been kind of going back and forth on what we wanted to do together. And then he kind of drew this cover for this super, fictional superhero. And I was like, this is really good. Like, you should go forward with this. And he was kind of into it. And then he started sending me pages he was drawing. I was like, yep, like this is perfect. Like, this is where we're going. Me and Ian Thomas are doing not me, I'm just publishing it. Ian is doing a collection of essays and writings. That's going to be an extension of the But Wait, Don't Forget About series. And that's going to be a benefit project for some mutual aid groups between Pittsburgh and in New Haven, where I'm from. So we're going to do everything. It's going to be called But Wait, Don't Forget About Your Neighbor. And it's going to kind of have this through line of comics and their kind of history with like leftist politics and working class politics. So Ian's been working on that for a while. There's more. I know there's more.
No, but kudos to those portions of the mag too. The Don't Forget About, and also the dollar bin, bargain bin kind of areas where you just kind of get re-exposed to something you probably have never heard of.
The dollar bin's been fun. I did the first one myself, and then I just kind of like started having this rotating cast, and it's been, every time I get someone to say yes to it, I'm always surprised. Like, I just kind of like, I reached out to Ben Merritt. I was like, hey, why don't you do this? And he's like, sure. Like, I'd love to. Like, Ben Merritt's doing this for me now. And it's just kind of been up and up and getting some really interesting people to do it. And now, like, my friend Brandon's doing the next issue. He has an Instagram called Subpar Comics, and he's like a real, like, he's just like a real like dollar bin head. Like, he's always picking up like these weird kind of bizarre pieces. And I was like, dude, like, you should do one. Like, he's just like guy with good taste. And I figured, why not?
Right. Good taste, different perspective.
Exactly.
It's awesome, man. Well, we're about ready to wrap up here, but before we go, I mean, thank you so much for what you're doing. Just, I guess, keep fucking doing it. Don't let the move put you down.
It was a pleasure meeting you, bro. Really, we've said a couple of times, your name kept coming up, and the zine just kept popping up, and getting a chance to review them all and kind of going over them. It's great. You're doing great work. Keep doing what you're doing. We love you here at Rat Nest because you've got the same idea as what we're trying to do. And that's just create a platform, expose artists, show the world what they can do. And you're building it on a great level, man. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and keep up, bro. Have a good move.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate being on. You know, I love what Rathnet's doing. I love all the stuff you're doing with Charles, and you know, you guys are just awesome. So I'm glad to be on.
Cool. Thank you so much, man. This has been Eddie with Strangers. You can check everything out at, is it strangersfanzine.com?
Strangersfanzine.bigcartel.com. There is a strangersfanzine.com, but it's going to give you to like a weird website that I've only done a little bit of work to. So
actually, yeah, before we go out, you want to plug your Instagram, TikTok, whatever the new social medias are, whatever you've got.
on Instagram, I'm strangers_fanzine. Like I said, with Big Cartel, it's strangersfanzine.bigcartel.com. You know, we do releases once a month, Fridays at 12. The date changes, but and then Twitter, I'm at strangers_zine because it was too long to do the full one. And yeah, just those three.
Awesome.
Dope, man. Well, thanks again. We'll talk soon. You always have new projects coming up, so in a couple months, whatever, we'll touch base again and just shoot the shit if you're down.
Absolutely. We'd love to.
Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on, man. Thanks for being so honest and open and just kind of letting us in on your and pick your brain.
Thank you, guys.
Take us out.
All right, man. Thank you so much. This has been Rat Nest Podcast, episode number 15, 16. I don't know. With Eddie from Strangers Fanzine. See you guys next week.
Peace.